Everybody, we are here. This is Amy and Danielle, and we are here for our first episode of Let's Talk with Amy and Danielle. Once a week, we are going to come on and talk just briefly about a topic that we think people need more information about. So this week, our first topic is going to be allegations and what the process is if CPS comes to your door, what are your rights, and what can you do? So,
okay, so we're going to start with Danielle. CPS shows up and tells you that you have been named in a report to the State Central Registry. What do parents need to know?
The very first thing that parents need to know is to take a deep breath and relax, because these things happen, and stressing over it and freaking out is not going to help the process go any faster or any smoother. So that's really important to remember. The next thing you need to remember is the process can take up to 90 days. So CPS has 90 days to complete their investigation, and that can include talking to you, talking to your kids, talking to your kids' school, talking to their doctors, any related services. And the conversations can happen with your kids, can happen in front of you, not in front of you. They have the right to go to the school and talk to the kids. So you need to be aware that all of those things could happen.
Danielle, how much should I elaborate when they're asking questions?
Yeah, you should only answer what's asked. And for me in particular, that's super hard because I always want to explain things away. So an example that happened in my own world is someone asks you, does every child in this house have their own bed? The answer is yes. There needs to be no further explanation as to whether or not that child sleeps in the bed or shares a bed on a nightly with other people, or they do campouts, or they come in your bed some nights. The answer is, does every child in this house have their own bed? The answer is yes. So only answer what's being asked.
Okay. So what happens after they finish the investigation? What do I do? What's going to happen?
So an investigation, it can finish in one of two ways. The first way could be with an unfounded report, which means there's nothing more for you to do. The report's unfounded. It's kind of the same as being not guilty in a trial, in a criminal court. It means there's nothing else you can do. They don't believe that this allegation actually happened. The other way it can end is what's called a founded, which does not necessarily mean it happened. It's just that they believe it happened. So
Okay.
with that, in your letter stating you're either unfounded or founded, you always have the right to go to an administrative review, to send a letter and request an administrative review, and then ultimately a fair hearing. You should always request that, because the outcome of an administrative review is that the result of founded could be overturned. You could have it sealed. It could be expunged. There are just a lot of options. So when you have an option to sort of question the unfounded and be heard again by an impartial person, it's really important that you take that opportunity.
Okay, let's see. So when it comes back founded, we should go to administrative review or a fair hearing. Correct.
Yeah, and I think you request the administrative review. That's the first part of the process. And then after that, if that still finds the allegations to be founded, you can then request a fair hearing, which then goes in front of a hearing officer where you can kind of make your case. And there's lots of variables. And if you got to that place, you could always reach out to the coalition and we can support you on how to get through that process.
All right, great.
So with this whole process, it's really important that families know their rights. Why is it so important that families understand their rights, Amy?
Well, all parents should know their rights. Adoptive parents, kinship parents, foster parents. Knowledge is power. So going in, knowing your rights, what to expect, what you can do, what you cannot do, is always most important. If you haven't been given your rights, call someone like the coalition. We'll make sure you have your rights, but you should know them in advance. So the first right to know is that you can refuse entry to a CPS investigator. Know that that doesn't end the investigation. They can get a court order, but you do have a right to refrain them from entering your home.
Yeah. Do you have the right to know who called in the report? Like, can you tell that person, like, if your neighbor's pissed off at you, will they tell you your neighbor called in the report?
No, you don't have a right to know. You may know, or someone may even tell you that they called in. That does happen once in a while, but you do not have a right to know. The person who reports you has a right to confidentiality. So you should never assume, because assumptions can also bring you down a road that isn't correct. So what's good is to focus on going forward, figuring out how to solve this, and working with an advocate, working with the agency, an attorney, whoever you need on your side to help you figure this out.
Right. So can they talk to my kids without me being there? Because, you know, some of my kids could get really confused or be really stressed by that. So can they talk to my kids without me being there?
They can interview your children without you being there. You could notify them that you have concerns, you're worried about them. You might want to request that someone be there for them, some kind of advocate, therapist, but it's not a guarantee. They can talk to your children and you do not have to be present.
Okay. So while the investigation is going on, can CPS mandate me to do certain things? Can they tell me I have to do certain things?
Well, they can ask you to take certain parenting classes and things like that. And you kind of have to.
Have a right to go in front of a judge, Amy?
You do have a right to go in front of a judge. You can ask for advocacy on many levels.
Okay. And then what if they ask me to go to a parenting class that's like really far from my house, or at a time that's like when my kids are taking a nap? Can I find my own sort of services that meet their criteria?
You can. So you can look for these services in your area, ones that are convenient for you, as long as they're comparable to what your department or your agency is asking for. It should be okay. And you can advocate for yourself or have someone help you and say, look, you know, I can't drive 2 hours back and forth, you know, over to the next county. I heard there's a class about 20 minutes from me. It's given by another agency. You know, you could even ask that agency maybe for a write-up on the class. So definitely try to open those lines of communication so it's not any more stressful on you or your family.
Right. Okay. You know, the other thing that when we were talking about this that we said was really important is that you should always notify the child for the attorney if your child has a CASA
Yes.
or a law guardian or a guardian ad litem. You should always notify your agency. Don't assume that the people that are working with you as a foster adoptive family are aware of the investigation, because I think transparency is really important, right?
Absolutely, especially if a child has a CASA appointed, because they're supposed to be an unbiased third party, and their reports go directly to judges. So if you have, you know, if your child or children have a CASA, that can be really helpful in a circumstance such as this. Or if you have a good rapport with the child's attorney, then being able to say, hold on, here's what we've seen. Here's the interaction we've had with the children and the family. So kind of knowing all the players and really putting out that olive branch to people and getting to know everybody in the constellation.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really important, right? So just having open communication, but being thoughtful about who you're communicating with and who your best supports are, right? So reaching out to the supports. So
and keep, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, and keep track of the facts. You should be keeping a journal. You should be keeping a timeline and really focus on the facts. Something that I tell people all the time is that the emotions ride on the facts. So you have your facts, you document your facts, you have everything there. And then the emotional piece is either next to it or rides on top of those facts. Because when these things happen, like Danielle said earlier, facts, you're giving them the facts. They answer a question, you give them the facts. Because once you're emotional, it's hard not to be emotional, but if you let your emotions overtake you, think about when you're in an argument with someone, the other person shuts down. Or if someone's sad, they shut down. So kind of keep those in check and work on the facts, and the emotion comes on top of that or comes later.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. Something I always advise my families to do, and I even do personally, is I have just a little notebook, and if we have a particular incident that goes on in the house, one of my kids gets in trouble, we have an argument, something happens, on the day or that evening or the next morning, I jot down just sort of a timeline, really for a circumstance like this, in case CPS worker comes at my door, someone questions me as to what happened. I'm not emotional about it. I have some really clear recollection in the moment of what occurred, what the circumstance was, so that if I'm asked to recall it, it's fresh in my mind, because the next day I could be dealing with another issue, and I don't want to get the two issues muddled. So just keeping it doesn't have to be detailed minute by minute, but just even a timeline to refresh your memory if you're asked to recall it. That's something parents can do across the board, especially when they're parenting kids from hard backgrounds, that this might be more likely to happen with.
Yeah, and this isn't uncommon. I think it seems scary, especially if you're new to fostering, or you fostered for a long time and this has never happened. It's not a reflection necessarily of you. It is something that can happen, and unfortunately, it's part of the system. So you have to go in, kind of be a little bit thick-skinned, be ready to come at people with the facts, but know in the end what you're doing, the child is at the center. So
That's right.
Think off of that.
That's the most important thing, because I think, I know me as a professional, if this happens or when this has happened, you think, is it going to impact my job? Will my job have to know? Sort of all of these components. That makes it more loaded and more emotional. So I agree. I think sticking to the facts and really making the child the focus is the most important thing. So.
And then what's right will come out in the end. It just might be, a bump in the road, but like we said, be organized, be knowledgeable, and have those facts.
Right. And I guess the only other thing we can point out is that you can always reach out to the coalition. You can call Amy. You can call our helpline number. I don't remember. The helpline number is 1-888-354-1342. Thank you, Amy. Or you can always call our main number during business hours, 646-688-4321. And there'll always be someone there to support you and help you through this.
Yep. All right. See you next week.
See you next week, Amy. Bye.
Bye.